not, but Washington still had, according to Lafayette and DeKalb, he had fought in the French and Indian War. He was no lover of the French, and that was kind of an impediment to get started here as well. But anyway, this is sort of DeKalb. After Lafayette got to be a major general, he went to Brandywine. He agreed to pay for no pay and no command. He was wounded at Brandywine, of course. Meantime, DeKalb's negotiating and tells Congress, I do not think that my name, my services, or my person are proper objects to be trifled with or laughed at. This is a soldier's language. He had been insulted by Congress. He had come across the ocean with pure-hearted, I'm going to help America, and totally rejected. But I think that's a lot of DeKalb. He went to Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. You want to see the Moravians? It's a lot of interesting sidelines. I like it. You think after the battles at Germantown and Brandywine, the Moravians had all these beautiful brick buildings. Well, they made them into hospitals. The American Army said, look, you're going to have to take care of these people. So wagon loads of ammunition, wounded soldiers, all that were dumped on Bethlehem. I just think it's interesting. The Liberty Bell was sent to Bethlehem, Pennsylvania for keeping while the British controlled Philadelphia. And guess what? DeKalb was there about 10 days. He laid out the fortifications for Bethlehem. So ever the soldier, what's a soldier do? Hey, we're going to have to defend Bethlehem. He went out and laid out the fortifications. Oh, this is DeKalb. He is the bravest and truest of men and has the best intentions and a sound judgment. So after Bethlehem, DeKalb came down. He wound up at Valley Forge. Some of the historians have picked up that he was a curmudgeon because he was grumping at Valley Forge. You know, he was used to a French army. He was used to highways. He was used to enough food to eat. He was used to camps that were well organized and all that. And he really, really criticized the organization of the American Army. He was particularly critical of their ability to man posts and stand guard. He thought they were lazy. They didn't pay attention when they were standing guard. They could be surprised easily. And also the officers wouldn't go out and ride around the posts and check people. So he had learned all those things under Saxe, and he was adamant that they were going to happen. So he was at Valley Forge. He was writing his mentor and his wife saying, this is whoever picked this place was really not very smart. And he had recommended against it, so they went against his recommendation. But anyway, so for 2 years he participates. I like this chapter because it shows a lot. I was looking for a map that shows where the American Army was around New York for those 2 years, and there wasn't any until we drew this. And basically from Middlebrook, Morristown, you know about those winters, Stony Point, Newburgh, West Point, down to White Plains, they were moving back and forth for 2 years. They were worried every day that the British are going to attack us or they're going to break out. So it was hard. But then in April of 1780, I think it's important, you know, Charleston is under siege. We got to send troops down there to help. Washington picked DeKalb to command the troops that were going to go south to relieve Charleston. And I think that's one of the reasons I think that they had a good relationship, because that was an important assignment. It was independent. Nobody was going to be there to support DeKalb. He trusted him to get those troops down there and do what they were supposed to do. But it was a formidable undertaking. You can see there the sort of the arrow down. He had to arrange 50 ships to ferry soldiers from Head of Elk down to Petersburg. But most of it was a march. Now, Francis Marion. You all are a lot more expert about Francis Marion than I am. I don't know very much. I've read a couple books. I humbly think he was a natural military genius for partisan warfare. I mean, when you just think of what he did and how he figured it out and all that kind of thing, it's an amazing story. And I think DeKalb understood it, but what I really love is, every indication I have is that Marion and DeKalb hit it off immediately. And the reason I know that is this book, Parson Weems' Life of Francis Marion. Now, you all know Parson Weems was the Jeff Bezos of his era, right? I mean, he would sell anything to anybody for a nickel, and he would stretch the story however be. So when you're reading something of Parson Weems, you have to be very careful. And of course, Ory wrote there's a handwritten, there's a copy of the book with his notes in it saying how terrible a job Weems had done. So I don't take lightly that it's not perfect history. But embedded in that book is kind of Ory's, when we met Cal, we were the last Continental troops in South Carolina. We didn't know what to do, we went north. And they went north. Ory says we met him at the river coming from Virginia into North Carolina. And we don't know if that's true, but we know that Marion was there. Otto Williams says Marion was with us. Ory said the Maryland troops just looked great. They marched great, they had great uniforms and all this. And Otto Williams says Marion did not look great. I mean, they were not well clothed and all that kind of a thing. But Ory says almost immediately, DeKolb and Marion and Ory just had this connection. Now, part of that may have been not all the troops from that state between Pennsylvania and Virginia. I don't get a ooh-ah right for that. There was a guy named Smallwood that he and DeKolb didn't get along, and DeKolb might have been hungry for interaction with some real soldiers, but he and Ory, they became aides to DeKolb. And Ory has this story about after dinner, and I'll tell too much of it maybe. George, am I running out of my time? Wave if I am. But the story is at dinner. The first thing is DeKolb says, "How old do you think I am?" This to Ory and Marion. And of course, an embarrassing question, right? So they try to avoid it. They say, "Well, by the color of your hair, I'd say you're old, you're in the winter of your life. But by the rose of your cheeks, you're clearly a young man." And DeKolb said, "Hey, look, that's not good enough. Give me a number." So Marion says, believe it or not, 40. 40. And of course, Marion's probably saying, geez, I don't want to guess too old. I don't embarrass him. So he gave a lowball number to get away with it. But anyhow, DeKolb then goes into a story about how the Christmas before he left for America, he'd been home to Huttendorf. And he had gone to his home to see his father. And his father, he went to his mother's home, and she was weaving. So she was like 86. And he said, well, Father's out in the woods. And he comes in from the woods carrying big hunks of wood on his shoulder with his grandchildren, 87 years old. And DeKolb, when he's telling this story to Ory and Marion, just, gets teary-eyed about his father and how glad he was his father's still alive at that age and all that. The context is I'm a little older than I look. What's so interesting to me, back to Valley Forge, DeKolb took over a house from George Whedon with the Woodman family. And 60 years later, the Woodman family wrote the stories of the mother and father that had lived at Valley Forge at the time. And in that book is the same story about going to Huttendorf and seeing the father and carrying the wood and all that. So you could say, well, the Woodman family read the Ory book. I just don't believe that. I believe that DeKolb liked sitting around, smoking a pipe, sipping brandy, and talking. He's a farm boy. He was a farm boy, very, very comfortable around the evening fire. So anyway, he knew how to use Marion, and they hit it off right away. And Marion was sent south of Camden by Gates after they relieved to get ready for the South and that kind of a thing. So they were only together maybe 10 or 12 days. But Ory very movingly describes this great relationship. And of course, my deal is soldier to soldier. Horatio Gates relieved DeKolb. DeKolb was happy of that. I conclude there's been a lot of people in life. If you know Richard Stoddard Ewell, remember Gettysburg, the first night, Ewell did not take the ridge north of Gettysburg. In my heart, if Stonewall Jackson was there, that ridge would have been taken. Jackson thrived on independent command. Let me have him. I'll take the responsibility. Let me go. Ewell was a lot more, geez, what if I make a mistake? What if I, let's get the team to decide. I believe it's true. Independent command and capacity for it is a unique skill. And I think DeKolb didn't have it. I think that he was getting overwhelmed with all these letters to governors and all these kinds of things. You know, the weather was bad. And he was happy to have Gates come down. Now, I think there's a lot of sentiment against Gates in the world. But, you know, when I look at this, I try to be fair to anybody that wore the uniform and fought for our country. So I don't want to jump on. You know, I'll tell you three people that defended Gates: Nathaniel Greene, Otto Holland Williams, and Light Horse Harry Lee. So I think that's pretty good company to see. Let's be a little judicious in how we consider Gates. At the Battle of Guadeloupe, a guy named Monckton, who was Wolfe's deputy at Quebec, Monckton sent Gates to the king to report on the victory of Guadeloupe and said what an important soldier he had been. So he wasn't a fighter, he wasn't a combat soldier. But anyhow, Gates, he wasn't perfect, but who is? Anyway, DeKolb was happy to get relieved by him. They relieved up there, Buffalo Ford. There's a big march down. And this is the Battle of Camden, which you all know about. And there's DeKolb on the right. And, you know, the militia on the left leaves, except for the North Carolinians under Dixon. It's over in 45 minutes. And it's a disaster. It's a disaster. Fortunately, a lot of the Marylanders get away down the right. Marion's going to get 150 of them back in another day or two. But basically, it's a total defeat. Now, I think an untold story is what the Americans did after this. Otto Williams, Johnny R. Howard, and all of them went back to Hillsborough, North Carolina, and rebuilt a little bitty army until Greene came back down. And keeping that together and not quitting and saying, look, we're going to come back and win, I think it's a pretty remarkable story. But this is the picture of DeKolb. That's his aide there, Dubussion, D-U-B-U-I-S-O-N. There's DeKolb down. He went to the front, you know, put on his helmet, his spurs, his sword, horseback, horse-mounted, went to the front of his line, faced the enemy. He knew Cornwallis was up there, and he led the Maryland-Delaware lines against the British up front. Very soon his Schwartz was shot out from under him. He had a sword blow to his head. A Delaware captain named Jacquet put a bandage around the cut